take a look. We're going to do chapter 18, section 1, finding order and diversity. So what section 1 is about is how we organize and name all living things. It's very much how you kind of like organize your house, right? So if I gave you a list of a bunch of items and one of the items was milk, and I said, this, all I want you to do is figure out what room these items go in. You would put the milk in what room? What room would you put it in, Katie?
The kitchen.
The kitchen, right? And then the next item on the list was the sofa. Which room would you put the sofa in?
In the living room.
The living room, right? Okay. We're going to do the same thing with living things. We have to group them. And just so you know, there's 6 major groups for living things. So if you or something you know is alive, it has to go under one of the 6 groups. Those 6 groups are the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the fungi kingdom, the protist kingdom, the eubacteria kingdom, and the archaebacteria kingdom. Those are the 6 main groups for living things. Which kingdom do we belong to, do you suppose? Raise your hand, don't blurt out. Troy. Yes, Marie. The animal kingdom. Very good, right? And again, once we figure out what kingdom the organism goes into, can't we take each kingdom and organize it even more?
Yes.
Absolutely. You can organize it even more, right? So again, that's kind of what we're doing for section 1. Here are your learning objectives. Describe the goals of binomial nomenclature and systematics. Well, binomial nomenclature is a vocab term, so you might want to highlight or underline it. How many is bi?
2.
2. And the reason it's binomial is because we use a 2-word or a 2-name system. For example, for you humans, that would include me too, we use the binomial nomenclature Homo sapiens, and that's because we belong to the genus Homo, and the species is sapiens, right? And I'll give you more examples as we go along. Systematics is kind of a new word that we use. It's a fancy way of saying classification. All right, you might want to highlight or underline systematics. That's also a vocab term. All right. So that's what we want to do. Describe the goals of binomial nomenclature and systematics. In other words, why do we use them? And then the next one is identify the taxa and the classification system devised by Linnaeus. Okay, taxa is another vocab term that you might want to highlight or underline or circle. Taxa, the word taxa, is like a very fancy synonym for level or group. Level or group. So identify the levels or groups in the classification system devised by Linnaeus. There was this guy, his name was Carolus Linnaeus, and he was the first person that tried to group all living things, right? It was a few hundred years ago, all right, but his idea wasn't too bad. We still use some of it today. The only problem is Linnaeus had only 2 groups. He said, all right, everything living falls under one of 2 groups. Everything living is either a plant or an animal. That's not that bad, right? For considering he was the first person to try to organize living things, right? So again, we don't just have 2 groups for living things, plants and animals now. We have plants, animals, then we have fungi, protists, and 2 bacteria groups. All right? Any questions? Okay. So take a look. I'm going to show you this picture, and this is one of the reasons why scientists decided that we should have a good classification system. All right? Raise your hand. Right here. Just one. Christina.
A lion cat.
A lion cat? All right, well, that's different.
A mountain lion.
Don't blurt out. Go ahead. What was it?
A mountain lion.
All right, mountain lion. I'm going to take a lion cat out. All right. Anybody else? Ryan? a cougar. All right. Anybody else? A cat, a big cat. It is a big cat. Anybody else? A puma. All right, which one's right?
All of them.
Mountain lion, cougar, puma, all of them. Listen, all of them are correct depending on where you're from. Some people would call this a mountain lion. Other people, again, would call them a cougar. This is one of the reasons why we came up with a naming system or a classification system, because there's a lot of common names for the same thing. And if you're from different parts of the world, you may not know that you could be talking about the same thing or a different one. Let me give you another example. Here in the U.S., what's a buzzard? Raise your hand. What's a buzzard? Nick, what's a buzzard?
It's like a bird that looks like a vulture.
It's so here for us. If you say the word buzzard, most of you are going to think vulture, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what a buzzard is for Europeans? A hawk, right? So do you see how if you're having a conversation with another young biologist from Europe and they say buzzard, you're going to think vulture, and they're not talking about a vulture, they're talking about a hawk, which are two very different birds, right? So again, that's why we need to use a universal and scientific system for naming. Yes.
Why do they say hawk or vulture instead of?
Why do they what?
Why don't they just say hawk or vulture instead of?
They do, but just like we sometimes use the word buzzard or sometimes we use the word vulture, they probably sometimes use the word hawk and sometimes use the word buzzard instead. All right, any questions? So in order to understand and study organisms of the earth, we have to describe them and name them. Again, very much like how you would maybe organize the items in your house, we're going to organize life. All right, common names can be confusing, so scientists have to develop an organized naming system. That Linnaeus guy, he's the first one that tried and came up with a system. And again, it wasn't a bad system, so we still use quite a bit of his ideas now, but we don't have just two groups like he did. We have 6 big kingdom groups now. Yes, Christina.
So you know how sometimes people put like a couch in like their bedroom?
Yeah.
So like what if someone messed up the system, what would happen?
So this is why when you do create a naming system, which has already been created, that's a good question. As you're grouping organisms, you want to look at their biological characteristics. So that way it's not an opinion thing, it's a concrete factual thing. And I'll give you an example. I could give you, let's say I give you a big list of animals or a lot of pictures of animals, right? And I said, you know what? All opinions aside, let's group these animals first into 2 groups. Animals that have a backbone and that don't have a backbone, right? Well, animals either have one or they don't, so that would be very easy to group them, right? Then, once you've separated them into 2 groups, right? Animals with a backbone, animals without, you could take, let's say we organize the backboned animals first, right? You take those animals, and again, this isn't based on opinion, like, oh, well, we'll do the pretty ones in one group and the ugly ones in the other, right? Well, what may be ugly to you may not be ugly to me, right? So what you do is, once you take your backboned animals, which tend to be a little more complex, then you could say, and this is what we do kind of do, we say, all right, let's take these animals and let's do a few groups. Let's put mammals in one, let's do a mammal group, a reptile group, an amphibian group, a bird group, and a fish group, right? I know you guys don't know everything about animals, right? I don't either, but I'm sure you would do a pretty good job of figuring out, well, which ones go under mammals, which ones go under reptiles. Again, there's no opinion involved. You're just literally looking at their biology. right? So if they have hair, if they're warm-blooded, if they produce milk and give birth to live young, then they probably go under mammals, right? If they're warm-blooded, but they don't produce milk, and they have feathers, then it probably... The sixth king we group all living things into are the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the fungi kingdom, the protist kingdom, the eubacteria kingdom, and the archaebacteria kingdom. And don't worry about spelling it correctly now. I will give you the correct spelling later when we talk about each kingdom. A bit of hair. If you look real close, they're a little bit scraggly. Yeah?
Why are like fungi considered plants?
So that's such a good question. That's what we're going to find out later when we talk, because we do have to talk a little bit about each kingdom, and that's exactly, actually that's going to be one of your questions on a quiz and I believe the final. What is the difference between fungi and plants? Because for a long time, we grouped fungi under plants, right? And then we studied their biology a little more, literally their physiology a little bit more, and realized, you know what, they're not quite the same, all right? So we'll get to that later, right? So when you're organizing living things, you can use what's called a dichotomous key, and it's very similar to what we were just saying with putting animals in either the mammal group, the reptile group, except this is like a chart, right? So take a look. Here's an example. What's nice is they didn't use an animal as an example because we always use animals. Let's try to think outside the box. Take a look at the leaf. If you can't see it really well, I want you to know that there's a big vein here, all right? And then there's several veins that branch off of this main one here, okay? Let's see, and then there's like even more veins off of these, all right? So here's your leaf there, all right? And so what you do, again, you could come up with one of these for animals, and you'd probably do a good job. You could do this for the items in your house. But you look at your chart, it's called a dichotomous key, and you start with step 1A, 1B. Normally there's 2 steps. There could be more, but usually there's like about 2, right? So the first thing you look at, according to this dichotomous key, is you determine if the leaf is a compound leaf or if it's a simple leaf. Well, a compound leaf is when you have a bunch of little leaves coming off of the stem, alrighty? Or you have one whole leaf, alright? Do we have a bunch of leaves coming off of this main little stem here? No. So are we at 1A or 1B? We're at simple leaf, right? Simple leaf. Leaf not divided into leaflets. What step do we go to?
Step 4.
Step 4. So go to step 4. I'm going to put this down now so we can see it better. All right, step 4. Take a look. Do the veins branch out from one central point, or do the veins branch off of a main vein in the middle of the leaf?
Main.
There's a main vein, right? And the rest of the veins branch out from the main one, right? So are we at 4A or 4B?
4B.
4B. Where do we go next? Step what? 6. Step 6. Step 6. All right. Now, does a leaf have jagged edges or smooth edges? It looks jaggedy. Look. Jagged means like toothy looking, right? So what kind of tree does this leaf come from? A birch. A birch tree. I said 3. A birch tree. Yes. And what this is doing is just describing the dichotomous key. Any dichotomous key. They're also very similar to field guides. Have you guys seen like bird books or tree books, right? So if you go out for a walk in the woods, you can get yourself a field guide. And if you wanna know what kind of tree you're looking at or what kind of bird you're looking at, you can look at it in a field guide, right? I have a bird one. I think it's called Birds of Northeast Indiana. And if I see a bird I don't know, then I use a field guide. Mine is organized first by color. So if I see a bird that's blue, I look in the blue section. And there's several birds in the blue section, right? So once I find the blue section, then I look for more details in the book that match the bird I see in the woods. Yes?
So the dichotomous species doesn't have to just be to the six kingdoms.
No! You can use, guys, you can make a dichotomous key for your house, especially if you're doing a whole kingdom, and you want to make a dichotomous key for a kingdom, your dichotomous key could have a lot of different steps. Absolutely. And so, again, you know how the dichotomous key that we just looked at, most of them were split into two. There was only like 1A and 1B. Sometimes there might be more than that, right? So you just got to read it and pick the one that best describes whatever it is you're trying to classify. All right, any questions? All right, awesome. All right, so binomial nomenclature, how many is bi? Two. Anybody know, if you're taking Latin, you should know what nomen means. Nome or nomen? It means name. It's name, right? Right? It sounds like it a little bit. So again, when we do organize living things, we have it's the binomial nomenclature that we have. In other words, it's a two-word system. Now, what's nice is, and this will be a quiz question, possibly a final exam question, if I give you the binomial nomenclature for an organism, I automatically just told you what genus that organism belongs to and what species that organism belongs to. Genus, and I'll give you the notes here on in a second, but a genus is a group of closely related organisms. They're not the same species, but they're closely related. So for example, black bears, brown bears, and polar bears, those are all true bears, like real bears. They all go under the genus Ursus, all right? Polar bears go under the genus Ursus, but their species is Maritimus. I'll go over how we pick the species name here in a little bit with the notes, alrighty? Yes, sorry, hold on.
So like, if there's like, they're all go under
Ursus?
but they have different names after that, then like,
There will often be more than one genus for different families. Yes?
so like, let's say one animal evolved from another one, and then it got extinct, what would happen to the...
Oh, that's a really good question. So listen, there are a lot of species that are extinct. When scientists do discover a new fossil of a species that they've never discovered before, they still try to classify it and figure out what kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species it would have gone.
But like, will it mess up the whole system?
No, it shouldn't. If you do a good job of classifying it and describing it, it shouldn't mess up anything up. Now, could you possibly have to come up with a new genus and species? Yeah, absolutely, and that's fine. That's okay. Yeah, that's a really good question. All right, here's another example. This organism here belongs to the genus Acer and the species Rubrum, right? Any questions?
What kind of tree?
I think it's a maple tree. I'm not very good with complaints. Morgan asked, what if a species goes extinct and it's the only one, right? We don't erase it from the records, right? We still keep it, absolutely. Alright?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
What are you saying? Because genus, they're closely related organisms.
Yes.
They're not identical, but species are what?
Species are the same kind, right? So all domestic horses are in the same species. They would be very similar to zebras, right? But not this, right? So, and remember, the definition of a species is individuals that are able to mate together and have healthy, fertile babies, right? It's organisms that are the same kind, or sometimes